Hello everybody, and welcome back to another tier list video. Let's first address the elephant in the room before anything else about, how I haven't uploaded a video for a few weeks, how some of you would have noticed I changed my name for a little bit, blah blah blah. I won't go into it too much, but just as a general overview, for some of those who might have noticed and might be confused, the basic outline was that there was a lot of stuff going on in relation to the tier list that wasn't ideal. We know that. That includes how some people behaved, but also how I behaved. And by the time I pulled away for a little bit, I was very much doing things that I wasn't particularly happy with, that were quite petty, that were just generally hurtful. So it wasn't worth it on my part to keep going and kind of try to act like every part of what I wanted to be. Like, on one part I wanted to say things when people got involved. On the other hand, I wanted to show people that I didn't have beef with people, and yeah, it was just very messy. But yeah, ever since then, things have calmed down dramatically. Obviously, Texas Chainsaw Massacre coming out helped with that a lot. And I do now think it's the right time to, finish off the tier list series in a more chill way, because I think if I did these videos as well a few weeks ago, as we got into like the real upper tier, the energy, which was already bad, would have been even less savory after the next few videos. So it was worth pulling back from, letting people chill out, and yeah, just making sure I came back when things were a bit more chill. And I expect one or two people to still make an issue in these remaining videos, but I just don't care. Like, the last video I uploaded, it was, again, around that time, for a good week or so, either side of that video, I was just getting involved in the pettiness again and trying to cover all angles, and it wasn't doing any favors to anyone. So yeah, we're now back, we're good to go again, so by all means, let's go again. If you are unaware of the last video, it has been a hot minute. We started the B tier last time, and today I'm going to get through as many of the B tier as I can again. I fully expect one more part after this, especially with this near 4-minute intro, but nevertheless, we will see how it goes. And also, we will see how it goes in general in regards to how the video is received, because last thing I want is to spike things up again. And by all means, if it comes across, or if there's an atmosphere that just is very unpleasant, then yeah, I'll see what I'm gonna do for the remaining videos. But anyway, today we are going to start with a very high-ranked player. It doesn't really narrow it down, I know, but they were 999 with somebody. They were 999 with a mastermind. They were 999 with a net. It's the big old boy from back in the day, Ces Minato. Now, a couple of videos back, I remember saying, I can't even remember who it was, saying that they were like the big name Annette during the first few months of the game, when actually I just completely forgot about Ces Minato in that moment, even though he was still on the tier list. But yeah, this guy was the mastermind to be feared back in the day. And by all means, don't get me wrong, if Meta Nikolai was a thing from the very first day of the game, people would have had much more to fear much sooner before the big Nikolais came along. But still, Ces Minato leveled up a lot. I'd watch his streams in awe of how he was just absolutely blitzing everybody. And yeah, again, he didn't age well, obviously. I don't mean in real life. I'm sure he's got lovely skin and gets plenty of beauty sleep. But yeah, even when I faced him one or two times, way past his peak, he was still good. He was still fun to play against. He was still competitive. So he can kickstart the restart of this tier list. I don't mean I'm going to do the F tier upwards again, by the way, by saying restart. I mean, we are starting the tier list videos again. Anyway, next one, we have a guy who, by all means, was known as much for his personality as he was for gameplay. Well, more so for his personality, to be honest. I was in a party with this guy a few times. By all means, I had fun with him a few times as well. He had a couple of catchphrases about booty rubs and stuff in front of Mr. X when he got killed. His whole thing in general was just wanting a bioweapon down so he could emote on them. But he was still a good player. It's ingenious Troop. Now, I think if Troop played the game proper seriously with his very serious glasses on 24/7, he could have been a very reliable, stable Tyrone in a good SWAT team. He was still a very good player, hence he is here in the B tier. But yeah, again, as I said, he was known for his personality as well, and the fact he had fun while also being good at the game is an extra bonus. Up next is a very interesting one. Now, obviously, in this tier list series, I'm trying to make it as big as possible in terms of the amount of people I include. But by all means, some people I have judged based off of a few clips where they might be at their worst, they might be having an off day, they might be at their best, or whatever else. So obviously, I haven't looked at every single person's 2,000 plus match history to make a judgment for the tier list. And why I say this is because it is even more relevant when it comes to the next person, who was one of the biggest names on Xbox who transitioned over to PlayStation earliest. It's Scarlett, Lady Scarlett Tiziana, I think it was pronounced. She had a couple of different names that were, part of her identity. She got to 999 with Jan on Xbox, and she did come over to PlayStation as well. Scarlett played the game when they were, when the game was more in its infancy, and I don't mean that in a bad way, I mean it as in even more of a reason that it's hard for me to fully judge them, because it's not like I watch streams of them every couple of days or whatever. I've watched gameplay of them. They uploaded some on YouTube and linked it through Discord, and they're a good player. I've seen them manage cams well. I've seen them just be a good, competent Jan. Something you'd expect from a rank 999, but again, nevertheless, a good Jan that I personally don't have the knowledge required to judge them properly, but just based on, I did rewatch just a couple of matches on their YouTube in the last, I don't know, week or two when I was, well, not week or two, I haven't been looking at the tier list for the last week or two, but the last weeks before I uploaded my last video, you know, when I was still making changes to the tier list, whatever, I did watch a couple more older matches that Scarlett uploaded, and yeah, just a good player, but I can't make the full judgment. So for now, I'm happy with their placement, but at the same time, it could easily sway if you played with her more. Next up is somebody who doesn't get enough credit. They don't really get any credit, to be honest, but they're a very good player. It's Jumpin' the Frog, or is it Jumping in the Frog? I can't remember the exact layout of the name. But they are a good all-round player. They can play multiple characters, but I was most impressed by their January. They are a very good January player. They mostly duo queue with Gloomy Sunday, and like Gloomy himself, obviously, you know, he's one of the most well-known Martin players. But on the occasions when Gloomy and me were going to duo queue or whatever, and then I noticed his friend Jumpin' the Frog was in the lobby. At first, I was like, "Oh, okay." I've not really heard of this player, but you know, it makes it a trio. And the first time I played with them, yeah, they impressed me. And then I was in a full team with them, with a few people as well. And every time they just play well. They just play well. And this is impressing me when, you know, it's trio queue or duo queue. I mean, well, no, that doesn't make sense actually, because Gloomy and Frog were a duo, and I made it a trio. And more times than not, I would have a fourth with me anyway. Anyway, nevertheless, what I'm saying is that Jumpin' the Frog was a very good January, and if I was to make like an underrated players tier list, they'd actually be like right up there, because they just get no credit. I'm sure if more people were aware of them, that they would get credit, because it's like they are undeniably good. But yeah, I just feel like I've never heard anybody mention Jumpin' the Frog outside from, you know, the couple of people who I've played with them. So yeah, nevertheless, B tier player, very good. Next up, we have, I'd even say the next four are quite similar play styles to each other. So first of all, we have Chris Calls This, super high Samuel main. My opinion on him changed. A lot of times, the first few times I bumped into him, actually. Like, obviously, he was a super high rank quite early, so when I first faced him, it was just the immediate impression of, oh my god, he's that high already, I'm going to get absolutely slaughtered. And then I guess as I got better at the game and knew more about the game, I realised they obviously wasn't as good as I imagined back in the day, because, I mean, that's normal. Like, back in the day, if I saw a high rank, I'd be petrified. I'd be like, well, I'm not actually petrified. That would be a bit weird. But, like, I would be like, great, this person's going to be invincible. And then you realise, no, they're not, just because they're a high rank. But yeah, Chris Calls This, he's a good player. Undeniably a good Samuel. There is games where they get too involved in the mind games. Like some matches that like I've faced Chris Calls This in or been with them in, I feel like we could have won the match, or he could have beaten me when I was mastermind, if he just wasn't focusing on emoting halfway through a match because something random triggered him. Like, just very weird minor things would annoy him, and then he'd start good jobbing for a few seconds and doing it repeatedly. Like, he'd do good job for 5 seconds, and then he'd play for 30 seconds, and a good job for 5 seconds again. And eventually, because he did it so much, he'd always get kind of punished for it. So, like, for example, when he faced my Terminal Spencer a couple of times, like, he'd just get annoyed because he was facing Terminal Spencer. But, like, he was on a full team, and they had USB. And I remember him being at my final core, and he was just emoting my camera because I was hovering over him, and he didn't even notice that the core had been rerouted back to him because he was just facing me and emoting. And it was like, what? And then he started hitting the core, and it didn't break in time. So yeah, that's like the biggest example, but it did happen to a lesser degree quite often. But anyway, they're still in the B tier because they're a good player, good Sam, one of the better Sams, and yeah, definitely a Sam with personality. Following them is another Samuel main, another high-ranked Samuel main, a 999 Samuel main to be precise. It's Michi. Now, Michi is somebody who I played with mostly when they were, you know, in a bit more of an awkward situation. Like, I'd be with them in duo or trio, and I'd also play with Michi when they, you know, were a bit more rusty. Like, I can't ever say I consistently teamed up with Michi when he was at his, like, prime or at his most consistent. But by all means, I have seen enough from him to say that, yeah, this is a good player. This is a good Samuel main. This is somebody who knows how to play. And there were, like, the first couple of times I faced him, I was like, oh my god, who is this guy? He's just complaining about lag all the time. He's really annoying. And then, like, because I thought he actually probably wasn't lagging and he was just making excuses, but then, you know, I got to know him and it was like, okay, you do lag a hell of a lot. And then it's like, okay, you're just a good player and you lag in quite a few matches. But yeah, nevertheless, Michi gives us back-to-back good Samuels. Following Michi is another guy who mained the melee. Part of the Polo squad. I think they summarize the Polo squad probably the best, because, you know, Polo's team have a very unique play style. Like, if I face certain SWAT teams, I'll know that they'll be refined. I know that they'll be a certain way. Like, some SWAT teams would be incredibly patient. Some would be just balanced in what they do. They never were too aggressive. They were never too passive. But Polo's team were, like, reckless in a good way and bad way. Like, they would sometimes be able to completely plow through a Nikolai in Area 1 by just all buying MQs, like way before that was judged to be a good choice. All buying MQs, all going like the same route on prison and just plowing into every camera. And they'd, every so often, you know, they'd have a really good time against a really good mastermind, but then, you know, later in the game it might catch up with them. But anyway, I think Carlos, DH, is probably the best representation of the Polo team in general. Just in play style. I think he is somebody who, for the most part, is a really solid, good player, but then on occasions during matches he'll have a lapse of concentration, or like the whole rush of being reckless 24/7 kind of catches up, and he ends up making a really easy mistake, an easy mistake to not make, but he makes it because, he's just trying to be aggressive and push 24/7 that something silly happens, and that's kind of what stops him being, well, like A tier. But by all means, he's still a very good player. Just again, representative of the Polo squad in general, where they are very aggressive, they're not always meta with how they split on the map in Area 1, or they're just in general what they go with for weapons against certain builds, but yeah. Anyway, after Carlos, I don't need much of a build-up to this one, because it actually is Polo. I've spoke about Polo in the Q&As before. I have said that I believe he's a little bit overrated, but he's also very good, and that is basically the summary here too. Would I say out of the more well-known and better Valeries that he would be my number one choice to face an Infection Alex? No. There are a few times where Polo could easily get through an Infection Alex, because he'd be aggressive and it would all sync up well with the melee guys, but then other times, like, Polo would literally just rush out and leave everybody stranded and vaccineless, and yeah, I mean, it's always fun to play with Polo, I'll say that much. Like, he's a really good player, but also unpredictable, and sometimes that's better than playing with a really good player who's just really good, because sometimes, it just makes it exciting and fun, and you might still win just in a more unconventional way. But yeah, the basic summary is Polo is still one of the best Vals, but he's one of the best Vals with, like, glaring weaknesses that other Vals don't have. Such as the example I just mentioned. Up next, it's back to Samuel mains, actually. Somebody who is, by first and foremost, all accounts, just a really nice guy. I've been with him in parties many a time, and he's just pleasant, he's just very personable, he's just very nice, and he's also a good player, a good Sam main, and I like his YouTube videos as well, when he uploads matches with me, of course. But no, it's Elsie Mucho. Came over from PC. I always knew about him, even before he was on PlayStation. But again, when people are only on PC or only on Xbox, it is hard to judge them, because, I don't want to sound elitist, but the PlayStation platform does have the most good players. I don't doubt that Xbox had some very, very good players, and they've shown that by transitioning over to PlayStation. Like, there's still a few Xbox players to come in the tier list. But in the case of Mucho specifically, like, I always found him fun to watch, but I just didn't know how good his opponents were. And by all means, like, since he's come to PlayStation, he's kept a pretty small group of people he plays with, and by all means, that's good. Like, have fun with who you play with. He plays with good players. He duo queues, he solo queues, and he's just a good player. I think if he was over in PlayStation earlier and got maybe wrapped up in the SWAT team experiences more, then he would be regarded as one of the best Samuels. Well, I mean, he is anyway, but one of the best Samuels who was, like, in the A tier type thing. But by all means, this is a guy who plays for all the right reasons. He has fun, he is wholesome, and he, yeah, again, just always fun and chill watching him, and he's a good player to wrap it all together. So, yeah, Elsie Mucho, really nice guy, really good player. Following him, we dip back into the Polo crew. It is somebody who, to be honest, when I first played with them, I thought they were maybe the weakest on the Polo team. But then, as things progressed, they got better and better. And now, to be honest, I'd say they are the strongest of the Polo team mainstays. It's Richie Willett. Now, obviously, when I first played with them, they only played Becker, and I thought they were good. But for most Beckers, because they do most things at a distance and you're not focusing on them, it is hard to judge them. And by all means, Richie just seemed like a good Becker, and that was all I could really say. But over time, like, I obviously played with his Becker more, got to know that, yeah, he is one of the better Beckers, and he also then started playing January, and a bit like Jumping the Frog, he is a very good January that doesn't really get praised for it. He gets more praise than Jumping the Frog, because as I said, Jumping the Frog just never gets mentioned full stop, but yeah, Richie's a really good Jan, and I kind of expected him to get more praise for his Jan gameplay, and it only came in like fits and spurts. So yeah, here's a little shout out for you, Richie. I think you're a really good Jan and a good player overall, and if you want the Depostrian Polo squad trophy for being the best player from the squad, then I'll deliver it to you in a day or two. Next up, we have somebody who I haven't played with consistently, but I have watched them stream a handful of times. They seem first and foremost like a really nice person. And they're also a good Becker. A very good Becker, actually, because, like, you know, I watch it from their perspective on the stream. And they're also a solid Alex. It's Lizzy. Lizzy XV, I believe, was their full name, with, like, an underscore thrown in there. But, yeah, there's honestly not too much to say about Lizzy, other than she seems a really nice, softly spoken girl who just tries to have fun with the game, make friends, and yeah, she also shows that she plays a good Becker, and she can hold her own in masterminding, and yeah, again, not many negatives to say about her gameplay either. Like, she's just all round solid and reliable. And I do think if she played, again, it's that thing, you know, if she had more exposure to, like, consistently sweaty matches, I think she's a Becker capable of really holding her own in them. Because I've faced her as well when I've been mastermind a few times, and she's very good. Very, she knows her movement and where to place herself, and yeah, just very good. Following Lizzy is somebody who, to be honest, a couple of months back might have been like just mid-C tier on my list. But I played them recently and have watched them recently and realised that, okay, yeah, they're very good actually. It's Azukar Wups. I don't know if that's pronounced right. But yeah, basically watched them play a few Nikolai games in customs and realised that they are capable of being very, very solid, and then faced them myself and had a very good match against them. So there's not much more to add than that, because by all means, up until that point, I was just like, oh yeah, they're good. They're solid. But then my whole like perception of them is kind of like different now, because it's like, okay, yeah, you are good, and I've watched gameplay of them even more, and yeah, they are capable of being really good. So yeah, Azukar Whoops. Following them is it's kind of been the day of a lot of January and Samuel analysis. Next up is another player who I didn't know really how to judge. Again, one of those like Elsie Mucho situations or Xbox player situations. We've had a few of them today, where I didn't know how to fully judge this person until I saw them at first hand. And even now, I still don't watch the gameplay consistently enough to be like, yeah, I have a full opinion on you now. Whereas like, in Musho's case, I'm like, yeah, I'm confident in where I've placed you type thing. This guy's good. It's Commander Shadow. Yeah, just a good Jan who knows what they're doing. Sometimes I have been watching their streams and seen them make interesting decisions, but they've also done plenty of really good plays as well. And yeah, I think they are somebody who, if I teamed up with them and let's say if I was on Jill, I'd be able to be like, okay, yeah, I fully understand how you work on Jan now, because that's the thing. I always, when I look at how a Jan is, I'm always like, okay, yeah, you're that good as Jan, and then I actually play with them, and that kind of, solidifies things or makes me think, oh, okay, they do this really well. They don't necessarily cover that particular spot of Jan gameplay. But yeah, with Commander Shadow, I've never played with them properly. I think I've had them on my solo queue team a couple of times, but like never in an organized trio queue or a full team where I can be like, okay, everyone's got their role. Now let me just see what's going on with me and Commander Shadow and like analyze him, They've always been two hectic matches, but I know they're a good Jan, a good player, and they rack up here for now. And the last one for this episode, it might actually be controversial, but I think that's an interesting way to close the episode, because it could be a bit of a talking point. By all means, this person is somebody who every single time I spoke to them was lovely. They were a really nice person, always very kind and polite, and a good player. I also think that they got just a tad too much praise. Honestly, to be honest, more than a tad too much praise. I do think they were, a bit overrated in general. But again, remember that overrated doesn't mean bad. Overrated, like, look, my definition of overrated is the right definition of you could be perceived to be like a 97 out of 100 player, but if I think you are more like a 90 out of 100 player, I'll still call you overrated to some degree. Like, in other cases, like the overrated players I've mentioned before, like, they might be perceived as like an 85 out of 100 player when it's more like 75. But again, that still means they're good. Anyway, point is, in this case, is Veska is somebody who I think is a bit overrated, but is also good. Yeah, I've played with Veska plenty of times. I do think that she is better with some characters than others. I mean, naturally. Like, you can go to every person in the game and they're going to have better characters than others to some degree. But in Veska's case, she mostly played Valerie. I think she was a good Valerie. I also think she had her weaknesses as Valerie. That was her strongest for sure. And then she also played a bit of Jan, and I, to be honest, don't think her Jan was anything special. She knew how to manage a game generally as Jan, but you know, especially against Nikolai's, her Jan was just a little bit too slow, and that's normal. But you know, it does also kind of make me think, yeah, like I would, if I had to have her on a team, I'd be like, yeah, definitely take Valerie. If we, you know, were going super serious. And I actually believe that her strongest character overall isn't a survivor, it's Alex. She's a trap Alex and infection Alex main. Well, obviously, no, it's kind of the two main builds. But yeah, and she, on a really good day, was capable of being really solid. I've seen her use Trap Alex incredibly well, and you know, other times not so much, but it's normal. But by all means, at her best, she was a very capable Alex, and yeah, her strongest overall individual character in the game to me. But yeah, still a B tier player, still a good placement in B tier. We are not going to finish the B tier today because we are 37 minutes in, but let me know what you think. By all means, I want this to still have feedback. I want to hear your honest opinions, if you agree with placements like his Veska, if you have more insight into people like Scarlett. Just let me know your opinions. Like, we are getting to the more anticipated parts of the list. So, yeah, give me your opinions still, and we'll see what happens. But anyway, thank you as always for listening. Hope you have a wonderful day, and Supercharge 1886 is out of here.